Sepulcher of the first ones has just been nerfed once again. It is one of several nerfs that has hit the raid this tier in its like 4 or 5 months since it was released. And it's gotten a lot of conversation going on Twitter and I guess just general WoW discourse where people are discussing the complexity of Mythic raiding, whether it's too difficult, whether it should be made more accessible and easier to complete for the average player, etc. So I want to just take some time in this video just to discuss it, give some of my thoughts, and kind of fill you in on where things are at. Feel free as well to check out the channel, twitch.tv /Psybear_TV, down in the description below. Come check me out on Twitch. Come watch me do some WoW gaming, some Mythic Plus and whatnot, and some TFT. But yeah, let's get into this video. So for me, when I really think about the challenge of World of Warcraft and how difficult it should be, I always think back to something that I think Asmongold discussed, and I think something that we all kind of feel in a way is World of Warcraft and MMORPGs in general should be about player envy. You should look at another player in the game and at times be like, wow, I want what they have, right? Back in vanilla, you'd look at a mage blizzarding and pulling 5-6 mobs at a time. You go, wow, I want that. But then at the same time, you'd be stealthing around on your rogue, and that mage would probably look at you stealthing behind a mob and then, you know, doing whatever, kidney shotting it and you know, blasting it whilst it's fully CC'd. And the mage would probably go, wow, that looks really cool too. And so there's always this player envy, and a lot of that comes down to gear, mounts, titles, like achievements, things that players have that you can see and go, hey, I want what they have. I remember being in Orgrimmar, and you'd go and you'd see a hunter, and you know, back in vanilla in like full BWL gear in that tier set, dragon, whatever it was, dragon, I can't even remember what it was called now, but the purple, the orange, gilded set. I remember looking at that and going, I want that one day. So I think player envy is really important. And the reason that player envy even exists is because players have some things that other players don't. And the only way you can have that is by having things have a massive time requirement, right? So I had to sink tons of hours to get this reputation or this grind for this thing. The archaeology mount, right? The Karaji mount takes months to farm, if you're lucky. Whereas raiding is like, hey, this is a skill challenge, a communication challenge, like how hardcore are you into the game? Like, have you geared up? Have you done your research? Do you have your weak auras, your add-ons, and all that kind of stuff in order to do that? Do you have a good, strong core team that's able to execute those mechanics and kill that boss? These things need to be challenging in some way, either by time, by skill level, by like intelligence, like whatever it is, something that you need to be able to invest in order to achieve them. So I think that for the game to have that envy and to really have value, this assigned value that we give it as the players, there needs to be difficulties in achieving these things. So if you make Mythic raiding easy enough for the average player to achieve it, then where's kind of the drive? Where's the push to be like, hey, I want to do that thing? I just don't think the content would be as good. And I think for a lot of players, it would probably be very off-putting if it was super easy for everybody. It also doesn't really make sense, right? Sloot put out a great tweet asking players, like, in the community, hey, do you think that the Mythic raiding should be achievable? Killing the last boss should be achievable and accessible by everyone? And some people saying no, some people saying yes. But when you think about the answer of, like, yes, it should be achievable by everyone, that argument kind of breaks down, and I get it that people want to feel like everyone's included all the time in everything, but I just don't think that that's a reality that can, like, it sounds nice, right? It sounds amazing, but the practicality of it just doesn't really exist in my mind, because if you have somebody who's logged in 15 hours a day, has 7 different characters, has, you know, researches a bunch of stuff, watches a bunch of streams, they go and research their rotations, they research other people's classes, they research like bosses, they're watching the best players, they have all the weak auras, all the add-ons, everything that they could possibly have in order to achieve killing these bosses in Mythic. And then you compare that to somebody who plays maybe only a couple hours a week, doesn't have weak auras or add-ons installed because they don't like to. Somebody like myself, for example, I don't really use a whole lot. They haven't really researched their rotation that much. They don't really watch streams. They haven't checked out too many of the bosses. Like, they're going to go into Mythic, and they should both be able to achieve killing that last boss. I just don't think that that's a realistic thing to expect. And of course, then there are a bunch of differences in just humans as how we are. Some people have like disabilities that might prevent them from being able to play at the same level. Some people, you know, are going to be smarter than other people or whatnot, right? Like there's things that can affect people that might make it challenging for them to kill some of the bosses on Mythic, but I think that's okay. I don't think that they need to, if it's not possible, right? Like if you're only playing the game 2 hours a day or something, you might not have time to be able to do it. I think that's okay. You can still play normal, LFR, heroic, like you still have access to these other areas of the game, and you can still achieve those achievements, and I think that that's okay. I don't think you need to make it so that everybody in the game can like kill these last bosses, because then it's not going to be fun for the people at the top, and there's going to be no real value in being able to achieve that thing. So that's kind of like, you know, my opinion on the accessibility and stuff of Mythic raiding. I think it's supposed to be a challenge. However, I do have a couple of arguments. I'm going to argue against myself now. If you actually look at Burning Crusade is incredibly, well, I say incredibly successful. There's a very active core raiding scene in Burning Crusade, right? And in Vanilla, and there will be in Wrath as well. And the content in Vanilla and Burning Crusade, it outright is not difficult. It is not as anywhere near as difficult as any content that we have in Shadowlands in terms of like the raiding is way more complex. Dungeons are way more complex. They scale up now with Mythic Plus. Like the content in Shadowlands is clearly more difficult. However, the content in Burning Crusade is still incredibly fun because you can still try and outpass people, or it's just like a fun way to hang out with your friends, your buddies, your guild, have some content, kill some bosses, get some loot. It feels good to get that dopamine hit, that feel-good chemical of looting an item. Like it's more casual, I'd say. But it's still, you know, there's still a hardcore scene. There's still people trying to outpass others. And there is still kind of that elitism even in Burning Crusade and things like that. So Burning Crusade has been successful even in a raiding scene that isn't necessarily difficult, with only one raiding difficulty. Whereas Shadowlands, you have tons of different difficulties. So even with only one raiding difficulty, Burning Crusade is still incredibly successful in the raiding scene for all types of players. I mean, Echo and like, you know, well, I guess pieces, like a lot of these guilds that raid in retail and Shadowlands, they also have guilds in Burning Crusade and they raid there as well. So clearly there's like some kind of reward for them playing that content, even though it's easier. So yeah, I think that you can make some things easier and people can still enjoy them for different reasons, right? But I think that Mythic raiding should be challenging enough that not everyone can do it, and because you have those three other difficulties that people can do. As well, I would say that Mythic raiding in general, I think, is a little bit too challenging, to the point where, like, if you look at video games in general, should you really have to, if you think about the average raider, somebody like myself, should it really take over 3 months of 9 hours of raiding every single week in order to kill the final boss of like a 10 boss raid? Should it really take 4 or more weeks to kill certain bosses of, you know, 10 hours a week? That's a lot of investment for these areas of the game, and I think that it could be toned down a little bit or kept the way it is. But, you know, there are suggestions of like remove the loot from Mythic raiding, make it just challenging, make it just for cosmetics, kind of like the ultimates in Final Fantasy XIV, where you don't get loot for them. They're really challenging fights, but they're like these 3 boss raids or these single boss raids, right? Where you just kind of go in, you focus with your team to try and kill these bosses, and they're really complex, they're really difficult. You don't really get a reward from them though. You just get the achievement to say, hey, I did that. And I think that can be really cool, maybe if they're smaller raids or something like that. Or even if, like, World of Warcraft made these, you know, 1 to 2 boss raids that are really difficult to do on Mythic, but they're just for kind of the achievement, something extra to do in your raid week. You say, hey, we've cleared the tier. Let's go try one of these, like, you know, really hard single bosses. They don't even need to be themed around the current expansion. It could just be like, hey, let's go kill, like, Gammon or something like that. Gammon's like he's gone off the rails. Like the way they do it in Final Fantasy is like there's a bard, you go to him and he retails champions killing a boss. And obviously the bard hypes it up and makes it seem more dramatic than it actually was. But you, the player, are playing out that fight the way the bard is telling it. And so it can be way more complex. And like that's how they get around it from like a lore standpoint, right? As far as I'm aware. So we could have something like that in World of Warcraft. That could be really cool. But yeah, I don't think raiding needs to be quite, like Mythic raiding needs to be quite as difficult per se, to the point where the average player takes as long as they do take. But I do think that it should still be challenging enough where not everyone can just go in and do it. So there's like a fine balance there. I think Jutnos made a good point as well, though. He also said on Twitter about how the reason that this raid tier feels like it's more difficult than other tiers probably is because we haven't really power spiked as much as we would historically. If you look at like the existence of corruption in BFA, corruption made the raid absolutely just like trivialized because of not true. Okay, not to that extent, but like once people had like full corruption and after weeks and weeks and weeks, like N'Zoth got a lot easier. I would say. I don't want to say it was like trivial, but it was definitely a lot easier than at the beginning with less corruption and more, more of the negative effect of wearing too much corruption. But obviously that dissipated over time. So maybe this expansion we didn't quite have as much power gain, but yeah, those are kind of just my thoughts. To kind of TLDR, I think that raiding should, Mythic, if it's going to exist, it should be really challenging. If we're going to have 4 difficulties, then sure. If we only had 1 raiding difficulty, then yeah, make it easier. Look at Burning Crusade. It's still really fun, has a very active raiding scene, even though there's only 1 difficulty, and the raiding is a lot easier in general, and the bosses are easier to kill. People still enjoy it. People still have fun playing it, even really good players that play Shadowlands and stuff. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.